together piece like the data and mystery. So, what is counterculture? So, a group of people who do and believe things outside of what society considers normal or typical can be called a counterculture. So, a counterculture might organize itself around opposition to or unusual ideas of raising children. So, counterculture is a social refers to a cultural group or subculture whose values and norms of behavior run counter to those of the region's social mainstream. It can be considered the cultural equivalent of political opposition. In the United States, the counterculture of the 1960s became identified with the rejection of conventional social norms of counterculture youth rejected the cultural standards of their parents, especially with respect to racial segregation and initial widespread support for the Vietnam War. As the 1960s progressed, widespread tensions developed in American society that tended to flow along generational lines regarding the war in Vietnam, race, relations, sexual norms, women's rights, tradition, modes of authority, and the materialistic interpretation of the American dream. Hippies became the large counterculture group in the United States. The counterculture also had access to media eager to present their concerns to a wider public. Demonstrations for social justice created far-reaching changes affecting many aspects of society. So the characteristics of culture is cultural movement may or may not include every countercultures are defined by their organizational nature, with members choosing to openly defy cultural expectations to their theories. While certain forms of media and art are often associated with counter movements, it is important to note that counterculture is not primary aesthetic ideas. Members of counterculture movements typically believe strongly in the values their movements espouses. So the next reporter will be Ms. Legola. Thank you.
Naghang pa, wait lang. Wait lang, naghang. So good day, everyone. Now we will discuss the counterculture in terms of. So first is counterculture in terms of literature. So, many counterculture movements have a particular attachment to various pieces of literature. Sometimes, literary works can become a kind of rallying cry for specific political stances. Some of that is books that have had a particularly strong effects on various countercultural movements. So, countercultural literature often reflects the dissenting voices and alternative perspective of the movement it represents. The first one is the Beat Generation in the 1950s. So, the Beat Generation was a literary subculture movement started by a group of authors whose work explored and influenced American culture and politics in the post-World War II era. So the bulk of their work was published and popularized by silent generationers in the 1950s, better known as beatniks. So authors like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg challenged societal norms through their writings, promoting nonconformity, spiritual exploration, and a rejection of materialism. Another one is the 1960s and 1970s hippie movement. So hippies advocated nonviolence and love, a popular phrase being make love not war, for which they were sometimes called flower children. So they promoted openness and tolerance as alternativeness to the restrictions and regimentation they saw in the middle class society. So the literature of this era, including works by authors like Ken Kesey and Timothy Leary, often explored themes of psychedelic experiences, communal living, and a critique of mainstream values. Another one in literature is the punk literature. So punk subculture influence literature with a raw, anti-establishment establishment ethos, works by authors like Katie Acker and William S. Burroughs reflected the rebellious spirit of punk. So, counterculture in terms of music. We all know that music is a powerful medium for expressing countercultural sentiments, and various genres have emerged as forms of resistance or alternative expression. Under music is the rock and roll rebellion. So, in the 1950s and 1960s, rock and roll music became a symbol of youth rebellion, challenging conservative norms and promoting individualism. It made an important impact on America and the world by inspiring and contributing to social and cultural change. Rock signified rebellion and young people's rejection of their parents' music, attitudes, and expectations. It also offered a bridge between races, classes, religions, and culture. The next one is the hippie and psychedelic music. So psychedelic music is sometimes called psychedelia, is a wide range of popular music styles and genres influenced by the 1960s psychedelia, a subculture of people who use psychedelic drugs such as 5-MeO and DMT, LSD, mescaline, and psilocybin mushrooms to experience synesthesia and altered states of consciousness. So bands like the Beatles, the Grateful Dead, the Jefferson Airplane created music that reflected the psychedelic experiences and peace and love ethos of the 1960s counterculture. So for the punk and hardcore, so the punk movement of the late 1970s and early 1980s with bands like the Pistols and The Clash express anti-establishment sentiments and a DIY or do-it-yourself ethos. So counterculture in terms of film, new Hollywood cinema that was popular on 1960s to 1970s. So filmmakers that time like Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, and Dennis Hopper produced films that reflected the countercultural upheaval of the era, such as movies Easy Rider and Apocalypse Now. For the independent cinema, independent filmmakers, particularly in the 1990s and beyond, have explored countercultural themes in films that challenge mainstream narratives, addressing issues like identity, social justice, and nonconformity. So, independent cinema are made outside of the film studio system, which means that they don't usually have any involvement or endorsement from the major movie studios or television networks. And they're usually made by people who work outside of the systems too, that make it na mas malaya yung mga gantong film. So, the last one, counterculture in terms of art. So, countercultural art often push boundaries, challenges conventions, and provides a platform for social and political commentary. So, for pop art emerged as a countercultural movement in the mid 20th century, challenging traditional artistic norms by celebrating the imagery of mass media, consumer culture, and everyday objects. Artists like Andy Warhol and Lichtenstein incorporated iconic symbols from advertising, comic symbols, and popular media into their work, critiquing consumerism and breaking down the barriers between high and low art. The movement democratized art by making it more accessible to the general public and offered a departure from the elitism associated with earlier art movements. Pop art also provided a platform for political commentary, addressing issues such as war and the impact of mass media on society through its alternative aesthetics and embrace of the visual language of popular culture. Pop art became a pivotal part of the broader countercultural movement that reshaped societal perspective in the 1960s. So, ito yung itsura ng pop art. The next one is the street art and graffiti. So, um, street art and graffiti emerging from urban counterculture. Street art challenges traditional notions of art, often conveying social and political messages in the public spaces. And ito yung itsura ng street art and graffiti. And the last one is the performance art. So, performance art, artists like Yoko Ono and Marina Abramovic have used performance art to challenge societal norms, question authority, and explore the boundaries of human experience. So, one of the example of performance art is flip tap. Flip tap battle. We can consider it as a performance art in a countercultural system. So that's the end of my part. So the next one is the examples of counterculture that will be discussed by Rizalyn Lopez. Ah, hindi. Tuloy-tuloy. Hmm. Hmm? Hindi, nakamute ako. Hindi. Ako meron.
Ano? Mamaya pag ano na yan, mali. Oh, hindi pa. Ano mga political dito? Oh, anong pangalan mo sa kanya? Parang nagtawag sa
Happy series.
civil rights. The struggle for civil rights has evolved with ongoing efforts to combat racial discrimination and promote inclusive leadership. Key milestones include the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s, followed by ongoing movements advocating for racial justice.